December 16th, 1944, 5:28 a.m. In a snow-covered foxhole somewhere in the Belgian forest, 19-year-old Private Jim Larkey from Ohio is trying to get 2 more minutes of sleep before his watch duty starts. He's dreaming about his mom's apple pie. His buddy next to him is writing a letter to his girlfriend back home, telling her he'll be home by Christmas. 2 minutes later, their entire world explodes. At exactly 5:30 a.m., 1,600 German artillery pieces, hidden in the forests, camouflaged in barns, dug into hillsides, open fire simultaneously along an 85-mile front. The sound is so loud that people in Luxembourg City, 30 miles away, think it's an earthquake. Within seconds, American positions are being obliterated. Trees are splintering like toothpicks. Foxholes are collapsing. Communication lines are being shredded. And through the smoke and chaos, American soldiers start seeing something that makes their blood run cold. Shadows. Hundreds of shadows moving through the fog. Then the shadows become shapes. Tiger tanks. Panther tanks. And behind them, 250,000 German soldiers in winter camouflage, advancing in the largest offensive the German army has launched since 1940. This is the Battle of the Bulge. And what you're about to discover over the next hour is not just a military history lesson. It's a story about how 19-year-old kids from farms in Iowa and factories in Detroit stood in frozen foxholes against the full might of Nazi Germany's last desperate gamble. A gamble that came within inches of splitting the Allied forces in half and potentially changing the outcome of World War II. We're going deep. I'm talking individual soldier stories, tactical decisions that saved thousands of lives, intelligence failures that almost cost us everything, and moments of courage so incredible they'll give you chills. And here's something most people don't know. The Germans almost succeeded. There were 48 hours where senior Allied commanders were genuinely considering a full retreat. But they didn't retreat. And the reason why is a story you need to hear. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, because we're going all in on this one. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, seriously, welcome. You've picked a great video to start with because today we're diving into one of the most pivotal, dramatic, and frankly underappreciated battles of World War II. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Another World War II video? But here's the thing. The Battle of the Bulge is not just another battle. This is the largest battle the United States Army has ever fought in its entire history. More Americans fought in this single battle than in the entire Revolutionary War. The casualties in 1 month exceeded the total U.S. casualties in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. And yet, when most people think about World War II, they think D-Day, Stalingrad, maybe Midway. The Battle of the Bulge? It's the forgotten giant. The battle that almost wasn't won. Over the next 70-80 minutes, we're going to explore why Hitler bet everything on this one insane plan, how American intelligence missed 250,000 German troops massing for attack, the individual stories of soldiers who held impossible positions, the military decisions that turned the tide, and the lessons this battle teaches us about leadership, resilience, and the cost of freedom. Before we jump in, do me a huge favor. If you appreciate deep dive content like this that doesn't just skim the surface, smash that like button. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this to more people. And subscribe if you want more content where we actually spend time understanding history, not just bullet pointing it. Also, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if we've got viewers from Belgium or Luxembourg, places where this battle actually happened. That would be incredible. All right, let's get into it. And trust me, you're going to want to stay until the end because the conclusion of this battle involves one of the most audacious military maneuvers in American history. Let me paint you a picture of where Nazi Germany stands in September 1944. Because you need to understand just how desperate Hitler's situation is to understand why he gambles everything on this offensive. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union has launched Operation Bagration in June 1944, and it's been an absolute catastrophe for Germany. The Soviets have destroyed Army Group Center, killing or capturing 450,000 German soldiers. That's the equivalent of 28 divisions, just gone. By September, Soviet forces are at the gates of Warsaw. They're in Romania, they're in Bulgaria. The Red Army is steamrolling west with over 6 million soldiers, and there's basically nothing Hitler can do to stop them. Every week, the Soviets are getting closer to Berlin. Meanwhile, on the Western Front, the Allies have just pulled off D-Day. By late summer, they've liberated Paris. American and British forces are racing across France. General Patton's Third Army is moving so fast they're outrunning their own supply lines. By September, Allied forces are at the German border. The industrial heartland of the Ruhr is within striking distance. Everyone, and I mean everyone, expects the war to be over by Christmas 1944. But here's what's happening inside Germany that most people don't realize. German cities are being absolutely destroyed by Allied bombing. Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne, these cities are burning. Industrial production is collapsing. Civilians are starving. There's no fuel. The Luftwaffe has been shot out of the sky to the point where Allied bombers can basically fly wherever they want during the day. Germany's allies have all abandoned ship. Italy switched sides in 1943. Romania just switched sides in August. Finland is negotiating surrender. Hungary is trying to surrender, but Germany invades them to stop it. Hitler's own generals are plotting to kill him. The July 20th bomb plot failed, but now Hitler trusts almost nobody. He's executing generals for retreating, for suggesting peace negotiations, for anything he considers defeatist. So here's Hitler in his bunker, surrounded by maps showing red arrows pointing at Berlin from the east and blue arrows pointing at Berlin from the west. Any rational person would see that the war is lost. But Hitler isn't rational. He's convinced himself that Germany can still win if he can just break the Allied coalition. And he's developed this theory, this obsession really, that the alliance between the Soviet Union, America, and Britain is unnatural. That Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill fundamentally distrust each other. That one big shock could cause them to turn on each other. So in September 1944, Hitler starts planning Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine. Here's what Hitler wants to do. 1. Mass 30 divisions, about 10,000 men, in complete secrecy. Launch a surprise offensive through the Ardennes Forest in Belgium. 3. Cross the Meuse River. 4. Drive 100 miles to the Belgian coast and capture Antwerp. 5. Split the American and British armies in 2. 6. Surround and capture 4 Allied armies. 7. Force the Americans and British to negotiate peace. 8. Then pivot everything to the Eastern Front and stop the Soviets. It's the most ambitious military operation Germany has attempted since invading France in 1940. And here's the kicker. Every single one of Hitler's senior generals thinks it's completely insane. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the overall commander in the West, tells Hitler flat out, this plan is impossible. General Walter Model, commanding Army Group B, looks at the plan and says they don't have enough fuel to reach Antwerp, even if everything goes perfectly, which it won't. Generals point out, Germany doesn't have air superiority. The Luftwaffe is a joke at this point. They don't have enough fuel. They need 4.5 million gallons. They have maybe half that. They don't have enough ammunition. The troops aren't trained for offensive operations anymore. Winter is the worst time to launch an offensive. Even if they reach Antwerp, they can't hold it. Hitler doesn't care. He pulls rank. He says any general who doesn't support the plan will be replaced. Some generals who object too loudly are arrested. So Germany is going to attack. They're going to scrape together every last tank, every last soldier, every last artillery shell, and they're going to roll the dice one more time. And here's the crazy part. They almost pull it off. The planning for this operation is actually incredible from a logistics standpoint, even though the strategic goal is insane. Germany manages to assemble 10,000 men organized into 30 divisions, 1,400 tanks and tank destroyers, including 45 of the new King Tiger tanks, 600 artillery pieces, 1,000 aircraft. And they do it in complete secrecy. Think about that. Moving 250,000 soldiers, thousands of tanks, tons of ammunition and supplies, and the Allies have no idea it's happening. How do they do it? Complete radio silence. All orders are delivered by courier. No radio transmissions that Allied intelligence can intercept. Night movement only. Every vehicle, every soldier moves only at night. During the day, everything is camouflaged. Fake radio traffic. German radio operators continue sending normal defensive communications from positions far from the Ardennes, making it seem like nothing's changed. Civilians locked down. Any Belgian or German civilian who lives near the assembly areas is either evacuated or prevented from leaving. The Germans can't risk anyone seeing the buildup and reporting it. Weather as cover. They deliberately choose December because the weather is terrible. Fog, snow, and cloud cover will ground Allied aircraft. Deception operations. The Germans run fake operations in other sectors to make the Allies think attacks might come from other directions. The operation is scheduled for December 16th. Hitler wants to attack in early December, but logistics force delays. That delay might actually save the Allied forces, but we'll get to that. 3 armies, 3 objectives. The attack will involve 3 armies. 6th Panzer Army, North, commanded by SS Oberstgruppenführer Sepp Dietrich. This is the main thrust, with the best units and the most tanks. Their job, blast through American lines, cross the Meuse at Liège, then race 60 miles to Antwerp. They get priority for fuel and ammunition. 5th Panzer Army, Center, commanded by General Hasso von Manteuffel. Their job, cross the Our River, smash through the inexperienced American 106th Infantry Division, capture the town of Bastogne, a critical road junction, cross the Meuse at Namur, and support the 6th Panzer Army's drive to Antwerp. 7th Army, South, commanded by General Erich Brandenberger. This is the weakest force. Their job, protect the southern flank of the offensive, preventing American forces to the south from counterattacking into the German advance. Everything is ready. The troops are in position. The artillery is sighted. The attack is scheduled for 5:30 a.m. December 16th. On the other side of the line, American soldiers have no idea what's about to hit them. Let's talk about the Ardennes Forest and why the Americans are about to get caught with their pants down. The Ardennes is this heavily forested, hilly region that stretches across parts of Belgium, Luxembourg, and a bit of France. Dense woods, narrow roads, steep valleys, small villages. In December, it's cold, foggy, and miserable. Military planners call terrain like this armor unfavorable, meaning it is supposed to be difficult for tanks to operate there. The forests limit movement, the hills create choke points, and the narrow roads mean traffic jams. There's historical precedent for this thinking. Back in World War I, the Ardennes wasn't a major battlefield precisely because it was considered too difficult for large-scale operations. But here's the thing, the Germans proved everyone wrong in 1940. When Germany invaded France in May 1940, everyone expected them to attack through Belgium's flat northern plains. That's where France and Britain concentrated their best troops. Instead, Germany sent their main armored thrust through the Ardennes. French generals said it was impossible. The Ardennes are impassable, they declared. Guess what? German panzer divisions smashed through in 3 days, crossed the Meuse River, and basically won the Battle of France in 6 weeks. So you'd think Allied commanders in 1944 would remember this lesson, right? Narrator, they did not remember this lesson. In December 1944, Allied intelligence and commanders have convinced themselves that Germany can't launch a major offensive in the Ardennes. Their reasoning: 1. Germany is finished. All intelligence indicates Germany is on the verge of collapse. They're losing on 2 fronts. Why would they waste resources on a hopeless offensive? 2. No fuel. Allied intelligence knows Germany is desperately low on fuel. They can't sustain armored operations. 3. Winter conditions. It's almost Christmas. The weather is terrible. Who launches major offensives in winter? 4. Ardennes terrain. It's difficult tank country. If Germany were going to attack, it would be in the flat areas further north where armor can maneuver. 5. Allied air superiority. Once the weather clears, Allied aircraft will destroy any German offensive. So why try? All of this logic makes sense. It's reasonable. It's rational. The problem? Hitler isn't being reasonable or rational. He's being desperate. So the Ardennes becomes what military planners call a quiet sector, or a rest area. It's held by the U.S. 8th Corps, commanded by General Troy Middleton. Here's the problem. The 8th Corps is responsible for 85 miles of front line. 85 miles. For comparison, military doctrine says an infantry division can effectively defend about 5 to 7 miles of front. The 8th Corps has 4.5 divisions to cover 85 miles. The math doesn't math. Let me introduce you to the divisions holding this sector. 106th Infantry Division, brand new unit. Just arrived in Europe on December 10th, 6 days before the attack. Most of the soldiers have never seen combat. They're replacing the exhausted 2nd Infantry Division, which is being pulled back for rest. The 106th is positioned in the Schnee Eifel, a forested ridge area. They have no idea they're about to be hit by 2 entire German armies. 28th Infantry Division. These guys are veterans, but they're exhausted. They fought brutal battles in the Ardennes Forest and took massive casualties. They've been sent to the Ardennes to rest and absorb replacements. They're under strength and spread thin. 4th Infantry Division. Another veteran unit that took heavy casualties in the Ardennes Forest, sent here to recover. They're missing lots of equipment and personnel. 9th Armored Division, an armored unit that's been split up. Parts of it are spread across the front with different infantry divisions. 14th Cavalry Group, lightly equipped reconnaissance unit screening the northern part of the sector. These units are spaced out. In some areas, there are literally miles between American positions. Company commanders know they can't possibly cover all their assigned sectors. They're hoping, praying that nothing happens. American soldiers start calling the Ardennes the Ghost Front because it's so quiet. Here's what daily life looks like in early December. Done morning. Stand to, everyone alert in case of dawn attack, which never comes. Breakfast, hot food if you're lucky, cold rations if you're not. Daytime, patrols, improving positions, trying to stay warm. Evening, stand to again. Night, guard shifts, listening to German troops across the way singing Christmas carols. Yes, this really happened. Soldiers write letters home. They talk about being home for Christmas. Some guys are taking correspondence courses. Others are playing poker. It feels almost like garrison duty. The biggest dangers are frostbite and boredom. Officers use the quiet sector to blood new replacements, give them some easy patrol experience before sending them to tougher sectors. Veterans see it as a reward for surviving brutal fighting elsewhere. But here's the thing, there are warning signs. Allied intelligence is picking up clues, but nobody's putting the pieces together. Ultra intercepts. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park intercept German messages mentioning mysterious troop movements and fuel allocations to the Western Front. but the messages are vague, and analysts think it's defensive preparations. Air reconnaissance. Allied pilots occasionally spot German columns moving at night, but bad weather prevents systematic reconnaissance, and when reports are filed, they're dismissed as routine troop rotations. Prisoner interrogations. A few German prisoners mention rumors of a big offensive, but their interrogators think it's just German propaganda meant to boost morale. Radio silence. Allied radio intelligence notices that several German units have gone radio silent. This should be a red flag, but analysts think these units have been destroyed and are being reconstituted. Civilian reports. Belgian civilians near the German border report hearing tanks moving at night. These reports reach intelligence officers, but are dismissed as civilians overreacting to routine movements. The most damning intelligence failure comes from a high-level briefing on December 12th, just 4 days before the attack. Allied intelligence estimates there are 13 German divisions on the Western Front in the Ardennes sector. The actual number? 30 divisions. They're off by more than double. It's one of the worst intelligence failures of the war, so we've got inexperienced and exhausted American units spread thin across 85 miles of front, with no idea that 250,000 German soldiers are about to hit them. December 15th, 1944, the day before the attack, is quiet. Some units are having Christmas parties. Others are receiving mail from home. A few soldiers get passes to visit Luxembourg City. Nobody knows that, in a few hours, this quiet sector is about to become the most violent battlefield in American history. Let me describe the weather, because it's crucial to understanding what happens. Temperature. Around 20 degrees. Got 6 degrees at night, barely getting above freezing during the day. Snow, several inches on the ground, with more falling. Visibility. Fog and low clouds. Sometimes you can't see 50 yards. Conditions. Wet, cold, everything covered in frost. American soldiers are wearing standard uniforms. Most don't have proper winter gear. Many are sleeping in barns, abandoned houses, or improvised shelters. The lucky ones have foxholes with logs over them for protection from artillery. The cold is brutal. Guys are getting frostbite on their feet, hands, ears. Some soldiers haven't had hot food in days because supply lines are long and the weather makes cooking difficult. On the night of December 15th, most soldiers are trying to stay warm and dry. Some are on guard duty, stamping their feet, breathing into their hands, watching the dark forest in front of them. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, the forest in front of them erupts in fire. 5:30 a.m., December 16th, 1944. Imagine you're asleep in a frozen foxhole. You're finally warm after hours of misery. You're dreaming about home. Then 1,600 artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The sound alone is beyond description. Survivors later say it sounded like the earth was cracking open. The German gunners have been preparing for weeks, sighting their weapons on specific American positions, crossroads, command posts, communication centers. The barrage lasts 90 minutes. 90 minutes of hell. Here's what's being hit. American artillery positions to knock out counter-battery fire, communication centers to prevent coordinated defense, road junctions to prevent reinforcements, known command posts to kill officers and create chaos, assembly areas to hit soldiers before they can reach defensive positions. The effect is devastating. Trees are exploding, foxholes are collapsing, buildings are disintegrating. Soldiers who survive the shelling are often deaf, disoriented, in shock. Communication lines, mostly field telephone cables, are being cut by the thousands. Within minutes, American commanders lose contact with subordinate units. Nobody knows what's happening. At 7 a.m., as the sky is barely getting light, German infantry begins advancing. They're wearing winter camouflage, white smocks over their uniforms. They're moving through the fog and smoke in squad-sized groups using infiltration tactics. Behind them come the tanks. Panthers, Tigers, Stoogie assault guns, King Tigers. The ground literally shakes as these massive machines start rolling. Let me break down what's happening across the 3 main attack sectors. This is where Hitler has placed his best units and his most experienced commanders. This is supposed to be the decisive thrust. The 6th Panzer Army is attacking into positions held by the U.S. 99th Infantry Division and the 2nd Infantry Division. These are veteran American units that have been fighting in the Ardennes Forest. The Germans hit them with everything. But here's what Hitler didn't expect. These Americans don't break. Private First Class Richard McKinley, a machine gunner with the 99th Division, describes what he saw that morning. The barrage lifted, and we saw them coming through the fog, hundreds of them, white uniforms, moving like ghosts. We opened up with everything we had. The fighting in the northern sector immediately bogs down. American units are surrounded, but they're fighting from prepared positions. Villages like Monschau, Hofen, and Rocherath become killing zones. The Germans expected to break through in hours. By the end of day 1, they've barely advanced a mile in most places. But there's one part of the northern sector where things go very badly for the Americans. Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper commands a battle group, Kampfgruppe, of about 5,000 men and 100 tanks from the 1st SS Panzer Division. His orders? Punch through American lines and race for the Meuse River bridges. He's been given priority for fuel and told to be brutal and ruthless. Peiper's force breaks through the initial American positions and starts driving west at high speed. For the next several days, Kampfgruppe Peiper becomes a nightmare for American forces. They're moving so fast that American units don't realize they're coming until they are right on top of them. Peiper's tanks roll through villages, scattering American rear echelon troops, engineers, supply units, headquarters personnel who never expected to see combat. But then something happens that changes everything. On December 17th, near the crossroads at Bastogne, near the town of Malmedy, Peiper's troops capture about 120 American soldiers from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion. The Americans surrender. They're disarmed and herded into a field. Then SS troops open fire with machine guns. 84 Americans are murdered, some who survive by playing dead or later shot at close range. Others escape into the woods. News of the massacre spreads through American units like wildfire. The reaction is immediate and intense. American soldiers become absolutely determined to stop these SS troops. Some units begin refusing to take SS prisoners. The rules of engagement change. The massacre also has a strategic effect. It hardens American resolve throughout the Ardennes. Soldiers who might have considered surrendering when surrounded now fight to the death because they're afraid of being murdered if captured. In the center, General von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army is attacking into the positions held by the Green 106th Infantry Division and the exhausted 28th Infantry Division. This is where the German attack makes its deepest penetration. The 106th Infantry Division is hit by 2 entire German corps, the LX-II Corps and the LV-A Panzer Corps. About 100,000 German soldiers are attacking positions held by roughly 15,000 Americans who've been in Europe for less than a week. Within hours, 2 regiments of the 106th Division, the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments, are completely cut off on a forested ridge called the Schnee Eifel. Think about that. 8,000 to 9,000 American soldiers are now surrounded, with German troops on all sides, no way to get supplies, no way to escape. The commander of the 106th Division, General Alan Jones, realizes what's happening and begs permission to withdraw the surrounded regiments. But the 8th Corps commander, General Middleton, and the 1st Army commander, General Hodges, both refuse. They order the surrounded troops to hold at all costs, because they don't yet understand how serious the situation is. For the next 3 days, these 8,000 Americans fight without resupply. They run out of food, they run out of ammunition, they run out of medical supplies. Wounded men freeze to death because there's no way to evacuate them. On December 19th, with no hope of relief or escape, the 2 regiments surrender. It's the largest American surrender in the European theater of operations. But here's what most people miss. Those 3 days of fighting bought critical time. Every hour those 8,000 men held out was another hour for Allied reinforcements to move into position. Meanwhile, the 28th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Bloody Bucket because of their red keystone insignia, is getting hammered in the center. This division has already been chewed up in the Hurtgen Forest. They're understrength, they're tired, and now they're being hit by an entire German army. The 28th Division is spread out along a 25-mile front, about 5 times longer than they can realistically defend. When the Germans attack, the division simply doesn't have enough men to hold everywhere, but the soldiers of the 28th Division don't run. They fight like hell from every village, every bridge, every crossroads. In the village of Hosingen, a single American company, about 100 men, holds off German attacks for 2 full days before being overrun. In Constam, another company fights until they literally run out of ammunition, then surrenders. At a bridge over the Aue River near Dasburg, American engineers try to blow the bridge to slow the German advance. The demolition charges fail. German tanks pour across. The engineers fight a desperate rearguard action, trying to delay the Germans long enough for rear area units to escape. The 28th Division is being torn apart, but they're buying time. Every village they defend is another few hours of delay for the Germans. In the south, the German 7th Army is attacking positions held by parts of the 4th Infantry Division and the 9th Armored Division. This is the weakest of the German attacks, but it's still intense. The Germans are trying to establish a southern shoulder for the offensive to prevent American forces from the south from counterattacking into the German flank. The fighting here is vicious, but more contained. American units hold most of their positions. The Germans make some gains, but nothing like the breakthroughs in the center. While all this is happening, German special operations are creating chaos behind American lines. Operation Greif, commanded by SS Sturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny, the guy who rescued Mussolini in 1943, involves German commandos wearing American uniforms, driving captured American jeeps, speaking English. Their missions: change road signs to send reinforcements in wrong directions, cut communication lines, spread false rumors, capture bridges over the Meuse River if possible. The operation has limited tactical success, but its psychological impact is huge. American military police set up checkpoints everywhere. They start asking questions only Americans would know. Who won the World Series? What's the capital of Illinois? Who's Mickey Mouse's girlfriend? Paranoia spreads. There are rumors that German commandos are trying to assassinate Eisenhower. They're not, but the security lockdown happens anyway. American soldiers start shooting at anyone who gives a wrong answer or hesitates. At one checkpoint, American General Bruce Clark is detained for several hours because the MPs don't believe his answers. Clark is furious, but the MPs are just doing their job. The chaos slows American response times, which is exactly what Scoresny wanted. By the end of December 16th, day 1, here's the situation. German achievements. Complete surprise achieved. American front line penetrated in multiple places. Major breakthroughs in center sector. 8,000 Americans surrounded at Schnee-Eifel. Kampfgruppe Peiper racing toward Meuse River. Captured supplies and equipment. American commanders confused about scale and direction of attack German problems. Northern sector attack stalled. Fuel consumption higher than planned. American resistance stronger than expected. Road network more congested than anticipated. Weather not cooperating. Need bad weather to keep Allied planes grounded. Behind schedule. Supposed to reach Meuse in 48 hours. They're not even close. American situation. Massive confusion at all command levels. Communications disrupted. Units surrounded or cut off. Heavy casualties. But no complete collapse. Key positions still held. Reinforcements beginning to move. As darkness falls on December 16th, the critical question is, will American forces collapse and retreat? Or will they hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive? In his headquarters, General Eisenhower is getting fragmentary reports. He doesn't yet know the full scale of the offensive, but he's experienced enough to recognize this is serious. Very serious. He makes 2 crucial decisions that night. 1, he orders the 82nd Airborne Division and 101st Airborne Division, both resting after brutal fighting in Holland, to immediately move to Belgium. These are elite units. If they can get there in time, they might stabilize the situation. 2, he orders General Patton to prepare to disengage his Third Army from operations in the south and attack northward into the German flank. This is incredibly difficult. Patton's forces are spread across a 100-mile front. Disengaging from combat, turning 90 degrees north, and attacking into a different battle is the kind of maneuver that usually takes weeks to plan. Patton, being Patton, says he can do it in 48 hours. Everyone thinks he's crazy. The next several days will determine whether Hitler's gamble succeeds or fails. And the key to the entire battle comes down to one Belgian town that most Americans have never heard of, Bastogne. Let me explain why Bastogne matters so much, because this one town becomes the linchpin of the entire battle. Bastogne is a market town in the Belgian Ardennes with a population of about 4,000 people. There's nothing particularly special about it. Some stone buildings, a main square, a few churches. But Bastogne sits at the junction of 7 major roads. 7. In the Ardennes, with its limited road network through dense forests, those 7 roads make Bastogne absolutely critical. If the Germans control Bastogne, they can move armor rapidly in any direction. Without Bastogne, German columns get stuck on narrow forest roads, creating massive traffic jams. Von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, knows this. His plan: bypass Bastogne with fast-moving armored units, while follow-on infantry surrounds and captures the town. December 17th and 18th becomes a race. German forces are approaching Bastogne from the east. American reinforcements are racing from the west and north. The Germans have a head start. They're already in Belgium. American reinforcements are still in France, but then something remarkable happens. The 101st Airborne Division, the famous Screaming Eagles, gets orders on December 17th to move immediately to Belgium. They're resting near Reims, France, recovering from Operation Market Garden in Holland. The division commander, Major General Maxwell Taylor, is back in Washington for meetings. So the assistant division commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, takes command. McAuliffe gets the word around midnight on December 17th. The orders are simple. Move to Bastogne, hold it. Within hours, over 11,000 paratroopers are loading onto trucks. They don't have winter uniforms. Many don't have adequate ammunition. Some guys are still drunk from the night before. They have no idea where they're going or what they're facing. The convoy moves through the night and all the next day, 107 miles from Reims to Bastogne. The roads are packed with refugees fleeing west, with American units retreating in chaos. The 101st is driving east toward the battle, while everyone else is running west. At one point, McAuliffe's jeep gets stopped at a checkpoint by a panicked officer who tells him the Germans are everywhere and it's suicide to keep going. McAuliffe looks at the guy and says, "We're paratroopers. We're supposed to be surrounded." The 101st arrives in Bastogne on the evening of December 18th, just in time. German units are approaching from 3 directions. Also arriving, Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, about 40 tanks and 3,000 men. Their commander, Colonel William Roberts, has been ordered to hold Bastogne. Roberts meets with McAuliffe, and they quickly organize the defense. They're going to hold a perimeter around Bastogne about 16 miles in circumference. It's not ideal. The perimeter is too big for the forces available, but they don't have a choice. McAuliffe divides Bastogne into sectors, assigning units to defend each approach. 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, Northeast Sector, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, East Sector, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, Northwest Sector, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, West Sector. 10th Armored Division units, spread throughout as mobile reserve. They also have artillery, several battalions of 105 mm and 155 mm howitzers. These guns will prove absolutely critical. December 19th, German forces begin probing attacks, small-scale assaults testing American defenses. McAuliffe's men hold everywhere. December 20th, the Germans launch serious attacks from multiple directions. The fighting is intense. American positions at villages outside Bastogne are being overrun. The perimeter is shrinking. By evening on December 20th, Bastogne is completely surrounded. About 18,000 American troops are now cut off, with German forces on all sides. Let me describe what it's like inside surrounded Bastogne, because the conditions are absolutely brutal. The cold. Temperatures are in the teens at night. Men are sleeping in foxholes, basements, and barns. Many don't have winter clothing. Frostbite and trench foot are as dangerous as German bullets. Supplies. The defenders have some supplies, but not nearly enough. Ammunition is being rationed. Medical supplies are running low. Food is scarce. Guys are eating 1 meal a day, sometimes less. The wounded. The town is filling up with wounded soldiers. The medical facilities, set up in a seminary building and several cellars, are overwhelmed. Doctors are performing surgeries without adequate anesthesia. Wounded men are lying on cold floors because there aren't enough beds. Constant attacks. German forces are attacking from every direction, probing for weak points. American soldiers are fighting from foxholes and buildings on the perimeter, while German artillery shells are constantly landing inside the town. Psychological pressure. The Germans use loudspeakers to broadcast propaganda. You are surrounded. You have no chance. Surrender, and you will be treated well. American soldiers respond with obscenities and rifle fire. On December 22nd, 4 Germans approach American lines under a white flag. They're carrying a surrender ultimatum from the German commander. The message is delivered to McAuliffe. It's formal and reads like something from another century. To the USA commander of the encircled town of Bastogne, the fortune of war is changing. There is only one possibility to save the encircled U.S., A troops from total annihilation. That is the honorable surrender of the encircled town. The message goes on to warn that if Americans don't surrender, German artillery will destroy the town and all forces. McAuliffe reads it, looks up, and says, "Aw, nuts." His staff officers start drafting a formal response, but then someone says, "What you said initially would be hard to beat." So McAuliffe writes his official response. To the German commander, "Nuts, the American commander." The German officers who receive this response are confused. They don't understand American slang. One of McAuliffe's officers has to explain, it means go to hell. When word of McAuliffe's response spreads through American positions, morale skyrockets. The message is clear. We're not surrendering. We're fighting. December 23rd brings a miracle. The weather clears. For the first time in a week, the sun is shining. The cloud cover is breaking up. And this changes everything. Within hours, hundreds of American C-47 transport aircraft are flying supply missions to Bastogne. The planes fly over the surrounded town and drop supplies by parachute. Ammunition, medical supplies, food, gasoline, artillery shells. Not everything lands inside American lines. Some parachutes drift into German-held areas, but enough gets through to keep the defenders fighting. American soldiers watch these supply drops with tears streaming down their faces. They're not alone. They haven't been forgotten. The clear weather also means fighter bombers can attack German forces surrounding Bastogne. P-47, Thunderbolts, and P-51 Mustangs strafe German positions, destroy German tanks, and cut German supply lines. The psychological impact is enormous. The Germans were counting on bad weather to keep Allied aircraft grounded. Now they're being pounded from the air while trying to attack Bastogne. German attacks continue throughout December 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Some of the most intense fighting happens on Christmas Day. The Germans throw everything at Bastogne: tanks, infantry, artillery. They attack from the northwest, trying to break through to the town center. American paratroopers and tankers hold them off in brutal close-quarters combat. In one sector, an American artillery battalion uses their howitzers in direct fire mode. pointing the guns horizontally and firing point blank at attacking German tanks. It's a desperation move, but it works. Throughout the siege, American artillery plays a crucial role. The artillerymen have pre-sighted their guns on every approach to Bastogne. When Germans attack, the artillerymen unleash devastating barrages that break up assaults before they reach American foxholes. Let me share some stories of individual soldiers at Bastogne, because this is where ordinary people do extraordinary things. Renée Lemaire, a Belgian nurse who volunteers to help treat wounded American soldiers. She works around the clock in the makeshift hospital, caring for the wounded despite constant shelling. On December 24th, a German bomb hits the building she's in, killing her and several patients. She's one of only 3 women awarded the American Distinguished Service Cross in World War II. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams commands a tank battalion from the 4th Armored Division that will eventually break through to Bastogne. When his tanks run out of ammunition, he orders his crews to keep advancing, reasoning that the Germans might retreat if they see tanks coming, not realizing the tanks are empty. It works. Private First Class Kurt Gable, an 18-year-old paratrooper who mans a machine gun position for 48 hours straight during German attacks, repeatedly repelling enemy infantry despite being wounded. He survives the battle and later writes a book about his experience. Captain James Parker, a surgeon who performs over 200 operations during the siege with inadequate supplies and in terrible conditions, he saves countless lives through skill and sheer determination. While Bastogne is surrounded, something extraordinary is happening 100 miles to the south. General George S. Patton is pulling off one of the most impressive military maneuvers in American history. Remember, Patton's Third Army is engaged in offensive operations along the Saar River in eastern France. His forces are spread across a 100-mile front, actively fighting Germans. On December 19th, Eisenhower meets with his senior commanders at Verdun. He tells them the situation in the Ardennes is serious and asks Patton when he can attack north to relieve pressure. Patton says, December 22nd, with 3 divisions. Everyone in the room thinks he's crazy. Moving an entire army 90 degrees and attacking in 3 days is considered impossible. You need to disengage from current combat, turn supply lines 90 degrees, move hundreds of thousands of men and thousands of vehicles, coordinate new attack plans, do all this in winter weather on bad roads. Military planners estimate this kind of operation takes 2 to 3 weeks minimum. Patton does it in 72 hours. Here's how Patton pulls it off. Pre-planning. Patton's staff had actually prepared contingency plans for exactly this scenario. When Eisenhower calls the meeting, Patton already has 3 different attack plans ready, depending on how quickly Eisenhower wants to move. Leadership. Patton personally drives to forward units, telling commanders face-to-face what's needed. His presence and energy galvanizes everyone. Logistics. Patton's supply officers work around the clock to redirect fuel, ammunition, and supplies north. They requisition every available truck. Communications. Radio operators and signal units lay thousands of miles of new communication lines to coordinate the new offensive. Soldier endurance. The soldiers of the Third Army perform incredible feats of endurance, marching long distances in terrible weather, then immediately going into combat. By December 22nd, 3 divisions of Patton's Third Army, the 4th Armored Division, the 26th Infantry Division, and the 80th Infantry Division, are attacking north toward Bastogne. The fighting is brutal. The Germans have positioned forces to block exactly this kind of relief attempt. Every village, every hill becomes a battleground, but Patton's forces keep pushing. On the morning of December 26th, elements of the 4th Armored Division, specifically the 37th Tank Battalion, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, punch through the final German position south of Bastogne. At 4:45 p.m., the first American tanks roll into Bastogne from the south. The siege is broken. The soldiers of the 101st Airborne, who've been holding Bastogne for 8 days, are supposed to be relieved and grateful. Instead, many are pissed off. One paratrooper is quoted as saying to the tank crews, "What took you so long? We've been holding this place just fine." The rivalry between paratroopers and regular Army infantry will last for decades, but the battle isn't over, not by a long shot. Let's talk about how close the Germans actually came to success, because this is important. Remember Joachim Peiper's battle group racing for the Meuse River? Let me tell you what happens to them, because it's both impressive and catastrophic. After breaking through initial American positions on December 16th, Peiper's force drives west at high speed. By December 18th, they reach the town of Stumo, only about 20 miles from the Meuse River. If Peiper can cross the Meuse and secure the bridges, the German offensive might actually succeed. The Meuse is the critical objective. Get across it, and the road to Antwerp is relatively open. But Peiper has problems. Fuel. His tanks are literally running on fumes. He's capturing American fuel dumps when he can, but it's not enough. Some of his vehicles are abandoned because there's no fuel to move them. American resistance. American engineers are blowing bridges in front of him. Small American units are fighting desperate delaying actions. Every hour of delay matters. The terrain. The roads through the Ardennes are narrow. When one vehicle breaks down, it blocks the entire column. Peiper's advance becomes a single-file procession of tanks and trucks, air attacks. When the weather clears on December 23rd, American fighter bombers find Peiper's column and attack relentlessly. His vehicles are being destroyed faster than he can advance. On December 24th, at a small Belgian village called La Glaise, Peiper's force is surrounded by American units converging from multiple directions. He has about 800 men left and maybe 30 operational vehicles. Peiper realizes he can't break out with his vehicles. On Christmas Eve, he makes the decision to abandon all equipment and escape on foot through the forest. Over 800 German soldiers, moving at night through snow-covered forests, manage to infiltrate through American lines and make it back to German positions. It's an impressive escape, but strategically, it's a disaster for Germany. Peiper's battle group, which was supposed to be the spearhead to the Meuse, has been destroyed as a fighting force. Left behind in La Glaise, dozens of tanks, vehicles, and equipment that Germany can't afford to lose. In the northern part of the battlefield, American forces from the 99th Infantry Division and the 2nd Infantry Division continue to hold critical positions around Elsenborn Ridge. The German 6th Panzer Army, which was supposed to be the main effort, has barely moved. They've been stopped cold by determined American resistance. The towns of Monschau, Hoffen, Roquerath, and Krinkelt become fortresses. American soldiers fight from cellars and buildings, repelling German attacks with incredible determination. The Elsenborn Ridge position becomes a hinge, the northern edge of the Bulge. The Germans can't get around it, and they can't break through it. This means the German offensive can't expand northward. All their forces are being funneled into an increasingly narrow corridor in the center, creating traffic jams and limiting their options. The farthest west the Germans get is the town of Kehl, Belgium, about 4 miles from the Meuse River. On December 24th, a German reconnaissance battalion reaches Celles and can actually see the Meuse River in the distance, but they can't advance further. They're out of fuel. American forces are closing in from multiple directions. The weather is cleared, and American aircraft are destroying anything that moves. On Christmas Day, the 2nd Armored Division attacks the German forces around Celles and destroys them. This is effectively the high watermark of the German offensive. By December 26th, it's clear the Germans have failed to reach their objectives. They haven't crossed the Meuse River. They haven't captured Antwerp. They haven't split the Allied forces. They haven't forced a negotiated peace. What they have done is create a massive bulge in the Allied lines, surround Bastogne temporarily, and cause tens of thousands of casualties. But strategically, the offensive has failed. Let's analyze why Hitler's gamble didn't work. 1. Fuel shortage. Germany simply didn't have enough fuel. They needed to capture American fuel dumps to keep advancing. Sometimes they found them, often they didn't. Many German tanks ran out of fuel and were abandoned. 2. American resistance. Hitler expected American forces to collapse and retreat. Instead, small units fought desperate delaying actions. Every hour of delay allowed reinforcements to arrive. 3. Weather. The Germans planned for bad weather to ground Allied aircraft. When the weather cleared on December 23rd, Allied air superiority became decisive. German columns couldn't move in daylight without being destroyed. 4. Road network. The Ardennes' limited roads created massive traffic jams. German columns backed up for miles. This prevented reserves from reaching forward units and made supply difficult. 5. Allied response. Eisenhower, Patton, and other Allied commanders responded faster and more effectively than Hitler expected. Patton's Third Army pivot was supposed to be impossible, but he did it. 6. Logistical reality. Germany was trying to advance 100-plus miles through enemy territory in winter with inadequate supplies. The logistics were impossible from the start. 7. Strategic delusion. Hitler's plan assumed the Allies would negotiate after being shocked by the offensive. This was fantasy. The Allied coalition wasn't going to fall apart over one setback. Now let's talk about how the Allies push the Germans back, because this phase of the battle is just as brutal as the German attack. By early January, the situation has stabilized. The Germans have created a bulge about 50 miles deep into Allied lines, but they're not advancing anymore. Eisenhower's plan is simple. Squeeze the bulge from north and south, cutting off and destroying as many German forces as possible. From the north, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group, including the U.S. First Army, will attack south. From the south, Patton's Third Army will attack north. The goal? Meet somewhere in the middle, cutting off all German forces in the bulge. Here's where things get complicated, because there's a massive political controversy happening behind the scenes. When the German offensive started, the bulge split the American forces in two. The First Army, north of the Bulge, was cut off from Bradley's 12th Army Group headquarters, south of the Bulge. Eisenhower made a controversial decision. He temporarily placed the First Army under British Field Marshal Montgomery's command to maintain coordination. This made sense operationally, but it created a political nightmare. American generals are furious. Omar Bradley and George Patton hate Montgomery and believe he's slow and overcautious. They're angry that American troops are under British command. Montgomery makes it worse. At a press conference on January 7th, Montgomery implies that he saved the Americans from disaster and takes credit for the victory. American newspapers go ballistic. National pride. American casualties in the Ardennes are approaching 90,000. Americans want credit for their sacrifices, not have a British general claim he saved them. Eisenhower has to spend enormous amounts of time managing personalities and politics while trying to win a battle. He eventually smooths things over, but the controversy nearly breaks up the Allied command structure. Putting aside the politics, let's focus on the actual fighting. January 3rd, the Allied counteroffensive begins. Montgomery attacks from the north with British and American units. Patton continues attacking from the south. The Germans are in a terrible position. They're low on fuel and ammunition. Their supply lines are being pounded by Allied aircraft. They're steam. They're defending in snow and freezing temperatures. They have no air support. Many units are surrounded or cut off, but Hitler refuses to authorize retreat. He orders German forces to hold every position to the last man. This is militarily insane. The smart move would be to withdraw to prepare defenses in Germany. But Hitler is convinced that holding the Bulge will somehow lead to victory. The result? German soldiers are trapped in the Bulge, fighting delaying actions they can't win, dying by the thousands. January brings some of the coldest weather of the war. Temperatures drop to 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Snowstorms make movement nearly impossible. Both sides suffer terribly. Frostbite. More soldiers are incapacitated by frostbite than by combat injuries. Guys are losing toes, fingers, feet. Trench foot is epidemic. Equipment failures. Weapons freeze and malfunction. Vehicle engines won't start. Tanks have to be kept running 24/7 because if they're shut off, they won't restart. Supply challenges. Getting food, ammunition, and medical supplies to frontline units becomes incredibly difficult. Many soldiers go days without hot food. Psychological impact. The cold is relentless. Men break down mentally from the combination of combat stress and physical misery. American soldiers later describe the cold as being worse than the German attacks. At least when you're fighting, adrenaline keeps you warm. When you're sitting in a frozen foxhole on guard duty, there's nothing to distract you from the cold. On January the 1st, 1945, the German Luftwaffe launches one final major operation, Operation Bodenplatte, baseplate. At dawn, over 1,000 German aircraft, fighters and fighter bombers, attack Allied airfields in Belgium, Holland, and northern France. It's the largest Luftwaffe operation since 1940. The attacks are coordinated to hit multiple airfields simultaneously. Eindhoven, Brussels, Antwerp, Metz, and dozens of other locations. German pilots strafe Allied aircraft parked on the ground, bomb hangars and fuel dumps, and try to destroy as much Allied air power as possible. The results, Allied losses, about 300 to 400 aircraft destroyed or damaged on the ground, plus another 100 plus in air combat. Significant losses. German losses, about 300 aircraft shot down, and more importantly, 237 pilots killed or captured. These are experienced pilots Germany cannot replace. Strategic impact, Germany loses more than it gains. The Luftwaffe is effectively destroyed as a fighting force. For the rest of the war, Allied aircraft will have almost complete air superiority over Germany. It's a Pyrrhic victory. Germany inflicts damage but cripples itself in the process. Throughout January, Allied forces slowly compress the Bulge. The fighting is brutal and methodical. Foxholes, a Belgian town that becomes the meeting point for Allied forces attacking from north and south. After weeks of fighting, American forces from 1st Army North and 3rd Army South link up at Foxholes on January 16th. This cuts off the escape route for many German units. St. Vith, remember this town from the first days of the battle? American forces retake it on January 23rd after weeks of fighting. The town is completely destroyed, barely a building left standing. Wiltz, Clairvaux, Vianden, small Luxembourg towns that change hands multiple times. Each one costs lives to capture. The pattern repeats across hundreds of villages. American forces attack, Germans defend. Heavy casualties on both sides. Americans eventually take the position. Germans retreat to the next village. Repeat. It's grinding, exhausting warfare with no glory. Just men dying in frozen fields and burning buildings. By January 25th, Allied forces have pushed the Germans back to their starting positions. The Bulge is gone. The front line is basically where it was on December 15th. But the cost has been enormous. American casualties, 19,000 killed, 4,700 wounded, 23,000 captured or missing. Total, approximately 89,500 casualties. Plus thousands more with severe frostbite British casualties. About 1,400 German casualties. Estimates vary, 67,000 to 100,000 total. Includes killed, wounded, captured. Plus massive equipment losses. 700 plus tanks and assault guns destroyed, thousands of vehicles, hundreds of artillery pieces. Civilian casualties, thousands of Belgian and Luxembourg civilians killed, tens of thousands made homeless in winter, entire villages destroyed. Here's what is critical to understand. The Battle of the Bulge wasn't just a tactical defeat for Germany, it was a strategic catastrophe. The forces committed to the Ardennes offensive represented Germany's last strategic reserve. When those forces were destroyed or depleted, Germany had nothing left. The panzer divisions that limped back across the German border in late January were shadows of themselves, understrength, demoralized, lacking equipment. The fuel consumed in the offensive was fuel Germany didn't have for defending against the Soviet winter offensive. The experienced soldiers, officers, and NCOs killed in the Ardennes were irreplaceable. Germany was now filling units with 16-year-old boys and 50-year-old men. While Hitler was focused on his fantasy offensive in the West, the Soviets were preparing the massive Vistula-Oder offensive. On January 12th, while the Battle of the Bulge was still raging, the Soviets launched their winter offensive with over 2.2 million soldiers. German forces in the east, already depleted by having their reserves sent to the Ardennes, collapsed. Within 3 weeks, Soviet forces advanced 300 miles and reached the Oder River, just 40 miles from Berlin. The Battle of the Bulge didn't just fail to change the war, it accelerated Germany's collapse. Now I want to share some personal stories from the Battle of the Bulge, because behind the statistics and strategy are individual human beings who lived through hell. Red Phillips was a 20-year-old machine gunner with the 99th Infantry Division. On December 16th, his position was hit by the initial German artillery barrage. His best friend was killed instantly by a direct hit on their foxhole. For the next 5 days, Red's unit fought a delaying action through the Belgian forests. They were constantly moving, always cold, rarely eating. Red later described it, "We'd fight, fall back, fight again. German tanks would come at us through the trees and we'd pour everything we had into them. Sometimes they'd back off. Sometimes they'd keep coming and we'd have to run. I saw guys freeze to death in foxholes. I saw guys cry for their mothers. I saw 18-year-old kids turn into old men in 3 days." Red survived the battle, but was severely wounded in March 1945. He spent 6 months in hospitals. He never talked about the Bulge with his family. When he died in 1998, his children found his medals in a journal he'd kept. That's how they learned what he had been through. Augusta was a black Belgian nurse of Congolese descent who volunteered to help treat wounded American soldiers at Bastogne. She worked alongside Dr. John Pryor in a makeshift aid station in a basement, treating hundreds of wounded under constant shelling. She worked for days without sleep, performing battlefield medicine with minimal supplies. At one point, the building was hit by German artillery and partially collapsed. Augusta was buried in rubble but dug herself out and immediately went back to treating wounded soldiers. After the war, her contributions were largely forgotten because of her race and gender. It wasn't until 2011, when she was 93 years old, that she received recognition from the U.S. Army and Belgian government for her heroism. Remember Abrams, the tank commander who led the relief of Bastogne? Let me tell you more about him. On December 26th, as his tanks were approaching Bastogne, they encountered heavy German resistance. Abrams's tank was hit and disabled. Instead of pulling back, Abrams dismounted, commandeered another tank, and continued leading the attack. When his unit finally broke through to Bastogne, Abrams didn't stop. He immediately organized his forces to defend against German counterattacks. For the next month, he led his battalion in continuous combat. Abrams survived the war and had a distinguished career. He later became a 4-star general and Army Chief of Staff during the Vietnam War. The M1 Abrams tank, the main American battle tank since the 1980s, is named after him. But Abrams always said the soldiers at Bastogne were the real heroes. His role was just showing up. McNeice was a half-Native American paratrooper with the 101st Airborne, nicknamed the Filthy 13 for their rough appearance and behavior. They inspired the movie The Dirty Dozen. McNeice and his squad held a critical position on the Bastogne perimeter. On Christmas Eve, they were down to their last few rounds of ammunition when Germans attacked. McNeice ordered his men to fix bayonets. They fought hand-to-hand in their foxholes. McNeice killed 3 German soldiers in close combat before reinforcements arrived. After the battle, McNeice was recommended for the Medal of Honor, but he refused it. He said, "My whole squad should get it, or none of us should. We all did the same thing." He received the Silver Star instead. Not all the stories are American. Let me share one from the German side. Lieutenant Hans Friedrich was a 23-year-old platoon leader in the 12th SS Panzer Division. He was a true believer in Nazi ideology at the start of the offensive. In his diary, captured after the war, Friedrich describes the first days of the offensive with enthusiasm. "Finally, we attack again. Finally, we show the Americans what German soldiers can do." But by December 20th, his tone changes. "We are running out of fuel. The Americans fight harder than we were told they would. We cannot move in daylight because of enemy aircraft. Many of my men are dead. By December the 28th. This offensive has failed. We were lied to. We have lost everything for nothing. The war is lost, and we are all going to die. Friedrich was killed on January 5th, 1945, during the German retreat. He was 23 years old. Let's not forget the Belgian and Luxembourg civilians caught in the middle of this battle. The massacre at Stavelot. When German forces captured this Belgian town, SS troops murdered over 130 Belgian civilians. Men, women, children. They were herded into buildings that were then set on fire. Refugees. Thousands of civilians fled west ahead of the German advance, walking through snow and freezing temperatures with whatever possessions they could carry. Many died of exposure. Destroyed homes. Entire villages were obliterated. Towns like Houffalize, St. Vith, and Wiltz were 80 to 90% destroyed. Families returned after the battle to find literally nothing left of their homes. The children. Belgian children who lived through the battle described hiding in cellars for weeks while artillery shells exploded overhead. Many suffered psychological trauma that lasted their entire lives. After the war, the Belgian and Luxembourg governments received some compensation from Germany, but it took decades. Some villages were never rebuilt. They remain ruins to this day as memorials. For American soldiers who survived the Bulge, the war wasn't over. Many went on to fight in the final push into Germany, crossing the Rhine and ending the war in May 1945. But the Bulge left marks. Physical. The frostbite and trench foot suffered in the Ardennes left many soldiers with permanent injuries. Guys lost toes, feet, fingers. Some had nerve damage that caused chronic pain for the rest of their lives. Psychological. What we now call PTSD was then called battle fatigue or shell shock. Many Bulge veterans suffered nightmares, anxiety, depression. In the 1940s and 50s, there was no understanding or treatment for this. Families dealt with the consequences alone. Survivors' guilt. Men who survived while their friends died often struggled with guilt. Why did I survive when he didn't? It's a question many carried to their graves. Silence. Many veterans never talked about the Bulge. They came home, got jobs, raised families, and never spoke about what they'd experienced. Some didn't even tell their wives or children that they'd fought there. It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s, as these men got older, that many finally started sharing their stories. Starting in the 1970s, veterans began organizing reunions in Belgium. They'd return to Bastogne, St. Vith, and other battle sites. These reunions were emotional. Men who hadn't seen each other in 30-plus years would embrace and cry. They'd visit the foxholes they'd fought in, now peaceful forest clearings. They'd stand at the graves of friends in American military cemeteries. Belgian people welcomed them as heroes. Towns held ceremonies. Schools invited them to speak. The veterans were often surprised. They didn't think of themselves as heroes, just survivors. One veteran described it, "We went back expecting to find ghosts. Instead, we found gratitude. The Belgian people never forgot what we did there." As I'm recording this in 2024, very few Battle of the Bulge veterans are still alive. They're in their late 90s or 100 plus. Within a few years, they'll all be gone. Organizations like the National World War II Museum in New Orleans have recorded thousands of oral histories, preserving these stories before they're lost forever. If you know a World War II veteran, any veteran, please talk to them. Record their stories. These voices are disappearing, and once they're gone, we lose something irreplaceable. Before we wrap up, let me share some incredible facts and stories about the Battle of the Bulge that most people don't know. These are the details that make history come alive. Fact number 1. The coldest winter in decades. The winter of 1944 to 45 was one of the coldest on record in Europe. Temperatures dropped as low as 29 C in some areas. The Our and Sauer rivers froze solid enough that tanks could cross them. American soldiers were issued wool uniforms that were completely inadequate for these temperatures. Many wore multiple layers of whatever they could find. German coats taken from prisoners, blankets wrapped around their bodies, newspapers stuffed into their boots for insulation. The cold caused bizarre situations. Machine guns would freeze and jam. Medics couldn't give morphine to wounded soldiers because the liquid would freeze in the syrettes. Guys couldn't dig foxholes because the ground was frozen solid. They'd have to use explosives to create depressions in the earth. Fact number 2, the Malmedy Massacre trial. After the war, 73 members of Kampfgruppe Peiper were put on trial for the Malmedy Massacre and other war crimes. The trial was controversial. Joachim Peiper and 42 others were initially sentenced to death. However, the sentences were later commuted due to questions about interrogation methods and evidence gathering. Peiper served 11 years in prison and was released in 1956. He moved to France under an assumed name. In 1976, his identity was discovered by former French resistance members. His house was set on fire and he died in the blaze. The perpetrators were never caught. The massacre itself had a lasting impact. It changed American soldiers' attitudes toward SS prisoners. Some units had standing orders to not take SS prisoners after Malmedy. Fact number 3. J.D. Salinger's lost work. Author J.D. Salinger, who would later write The Catcher in the Rye, fought in the Battle of the Bulge with the 12th Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division. Salinger saw intense combat and was part of the liberation of a subcamp of Dachau concentration camp. The experience profoundly affected him psychologically. Here's the fascinating part. Salinger was carrying chapters of The Catcher in the Rye with him during the battle. He worked on the manuscript in Foxholes between firefights. After the war, Salinger suffered what was almost certainly PTSD, though it wasn't diagnosed as such at the time. He became increasingly reclusive. Many scholars believe his war experiences, including the Bulge, deeply influenced his writing about alienation and trauma. Fact number 4. The checkpoint paranoia. The German commandos wearing American uniforms created absolute paranoia behind Allied lines. The security measures became absurd. General Omar Bradley was stopped at a checkpoint and asked who the capital of Illinois was. He correctly answered, Springfield. But the MP said the answer was Chicago, and detained Bradley for several hours before his identity could be verified. The MP was from Chicago and genuinely didn't know Springfield was the capital. General Bruce Clark was detained because he couldn't remember who won a particular football game. The MPs thought he was a German spy. It took hours to clear up. Password challenges became complex. But this created problems when American units from different states couldn't answer questions about other states. A soldier from Texas might not know the capital of Maine, leading to friendly fire incidents. Fact number 5. The chocolate ration. Mystery. During the siege of Bastogne, American soldiers were down to 1 meal per day, but there was plenty of chocolate. Why? Because the army had overstocked D rations, emergency chocolate bars that were supposed to be unpalatable, so soldiers would only eat them in true emergencies. They were designed to be barely edible. The chocolate bars were so hard in the cold that soldiers couldn't bite into them. They'd have to break them with rifle butts or warm them inside their uniforms. Some soldiers later said they developed a lifelong hatred of chocolate because of Bastogne. Fact number 6. The Ghost Battalion. The 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, the unit massacred at Malmedy, had something strange about it. Several soldiers in the unit survived the massacre by playing dead, then escaped into the woods. For the next several weeks, these scattered survivors formed small groups that operated behind German lines, sabotaging German supply lines, rescuing other American soldiers, and radioing German positions to Allied artillery. They called themselves the Ghost Battalion, because officially they were listed as killed or captured, but they kept fighting. Eventually, most made it back to Allied lines, but not until after pulling off numerous guerrilla actions. Fact number 7. Marlene Dietrich's Christmas show. Marlene Dietrich, the famous German-American actress and singer, was in Belgium doing USO shows for American troops during the battle. When the German offensive started, military authorities tried to evacuate her. She refused. She said, "These soldiers need entertainment more now than ever." On Christmas Day 1944, while Bastogne was still surrounded and fighting was raging, Dietrich performed for troops in a partially destroyed building just miles from the front lines. She sang Christmas carols and American standards while artillery fire could be heard in the distance. Soldiers who were there said it was the most surreal and moving experience of their lives, this glamorous movie star singing in a war zone, giving them a moment of beauty in the midst of horror. Fact number 8. The German wonder weapons. That weren't German propaganda told their soldiers that new wonder weapons would turn the tide of the war. Some of these actually appeared in the Ardennes, King Tiger tanks. The Germans deployed about 45 King Tigers, the heaviest and most powerful tank of WWII. But they were so heavy, 75 tons, that they couldn't cross many bridges, got stuck in mud, and consumed fuel at an incredible rate. Most were abandoned due to lack of fuel or mechanical breakdown. V-2 rockets. Germany launched V-2 ballistic missiles at Antwerp and other Belgian cities during the battle, killing hundreds of civilians. But these had no effect on the military situation. Jet aircraft, Me-262. Germany had the world's first operational jet fighter, but they had very few, and most were held back to defend Germany itself. They made almost no appearance in the Ardennes. The wonder weapons were impressive technologically, but couldn't change the strategic reality. Germany was simply out of resources. Fact number 9. The Christmas Truce. That wasn't unlike World War I's famous Christmas Truce of 1914. There was no truce during the Battle of the Bulge. Some of the heaviest fighting occurred on December 24th and 25th, 1944. However, there were small moments of humanity. In one sector, German and American soldiers on opposite sides of a small valley sang Christmas carols back and forth on Christmas Eve. They didn't stop fighting. They exchanged artillery fire during the day, but that night they sang, In another incident, a German medic crossed into American lines under a white flag to help treat American wounded. He worked alongside American medics for several hours, then returned to German lines. Both sides held their fire during this time. These moments were exceptions, not the rule. Mostly, Christmas 1944 in the Ardennes was just more death and suffering. Fact number 10, the Belgian resistance. Belgian resistance fighters played a crucial but often overlooked role in the battle. They, Jenas, guided American units through forests and behind German lines, provided intelligence on German positions and movements, hid downed Allied pilots and escaped prisoners, sabotaged German communications and supply lines, helped evacuate wounded American soldiers. Many Belgian resistance members were captured and executed by the Germans. After the war, some received recognition from the US government, but many never did. Their contribution has been largely forgotten. Fact number 11. The typewriter. War Allied intelligence officers noticed something strange. Captured German orders were full of typos and formatting errors. Why? Because German units were so depleted of personnel that they were using soldiers who weren't trained typists to prepare orders. The typographical errors actually helped Allied intelligence identify which units were where, because each unit's typist made characteristic mistakes. This seems like a small detail, but it shows how degraded German military capability had become by late 1944. Fact number 12. The frozen blood supplies. Blood plasma for treating wounded soldiers was shipped from the United States to Europe, but in the extreme cold of the Ardennes, plasma would freeze and become unusable. Army medics developed an improvised solution. They'd carry plasma bottles inside their uniforms, next to their bodies, to keep it warm enough to use. Some medics ended up with frostbite on their torsos from carrying frozen plasma bottles. Despite this, many wounded soldiers died from blood loss because plasma couldn't be administered in time. So what can we learn from the Battle of the Bulge? Why does this battle still matter 80 years later? Lesson number 1. Intelligence failures have consequences. The Allied intelligence failure before the Battle of the Bulge is one of the most studied in military history. How did the Allies miss 250,000 German troops massing for attack? The failure came from several factors. Confirmation. Bias. Allied commanders believed Germany was finished, so they interpreted all intelligence through that lens. Information that contradicted their beliefs was dismissed. Over-reliance on technology. Allied commanders trusted ultra-intelligence, decoded German radio messages, so much that when Germans went radio silent, commanders assumed nothing was happening. Underestimating the enemy, Allies thought Hitler was too rational to launch a hopeless offensive. But Hitler wasn't being rational, he was being desperate. Fragmented information, multiple agencies picked up clues, but nobody assembled the complete picture. The puzzle pieces were there, nobody put them together. This same pattern of intelligence failure would repeat in future conflicts. The 1968 Tet Offensive in Vietnam, the 1973 Yom Kippur War, even 9/11. The lesson, never assume you know what the enemy will do. Stay humble about your intelligence. Lesson number 2. Junior leaders matter. The Battle of the Bulge was won not by generals making brilliant plans, but by junior officers, sergeants, and individual soldiers making split-second decisions in chaotic situations. When communication broke down, junior leaders had to make life-or-death decisions without guidance from higher headquarters. Many 22-year-old lieutenants found themselves commanding survivors from multiple units, defending positions that weren't on any map. Sergeants held positions when officers were killed. Private soldiers manned weapons alone when everyone else was wounded. Medics treated casualties under fire while making triage decisions about who might survive. Organizations succeed or fail based on the quality of their junior leaders. This applies not just to military, but to businesses, schools, any organization. The best strategic plan fails if junior leaders can't execute it. Lesson number 3. Resilience. Under pressure. The American soldiers at Bastogne, St. Vith, and dozens of other positions showed extraordinary resilience. They were surrounded and outnumbered, low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies, freezing and inadequate clothing, facing an enemy with superior numbers and firepower, cut off from reinforcements, given orders to hold at all costs. Most military theorists would predict these units would collapse and surrender. Instead, they held. Why? Unit cohesion. Soldiers fight for each other. They didn't want to let their buddies down. Leadership. Officers like McAuliffe at Bastogne showed courage and confidence that inspired their men. Belief in the cause. Soldiers understood they were fighting against Nazi tyranny. The cause mattered. American character. There's something about American culture, independence, stubbornness, refusal to accept defeat, that showed up in the Ardennes. This resilience under pressure is worth studying. What makes some people and organizations collapse under stress while others thrive? The Battle of the Bulge provides case studies in resilience. Lesson, there were 4. Logistics win wars. The Battle of the Bulge ultimately came down to logistics. Germany lost because they ran out of fuel, ammunition, and supplies. Their logistics couldn't support the offensive. Allies won because they could rapidly redeploy forces, establish supply lines, and sustain operations. Patton's Third Army pivot, moving an entire army 90 degrees in 72 hours, was a logistical miracle. There's a saying in military circles, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. The Battle of the Bulge proves this. The flashy stuff, the tanks, the heroic stands, the dramatic moments, gets the attention. But the unglamorous work of supply officers, truck drivers, quartermasters, and engineers actually determines who wins. This lesson applies beyond military affairs. In business, having a brilliant product means nothing if you can't deliver it to customers. In personal life, having big dreams means nothing without the daily discipline to pursue them. Lesson number 5. Desperation makes people dangerous, but also reckless. Hitler's decision to launch the Ardennes offensive was driven by desperation. And desperate people can be extremely dangerous because they have nothing to lose. The initial German attack was ferocious. Desperate men fight hard. But desperation also clouds judgment. Hitler's plan was based on wishful thinking, not strategic reality. He hoped the Allies would negotiate. They wouldn't. He hoped Allied forces would collapse. They didn't. He hoped to capture fuel from Americans. He didn't capture enough. He hoped weather would stay bad. It cleared on December 23rd. Desperation led Hitler to gamble everything on an offensive that his own generals knew was doomed. The result, Germany lost its last strategic reserve and accelerated its own defeat. The lesson, when facing desperate opponents, expect them to fight hard, but also recognize that desperation often leads to poor strategic decisions. Stay calm, stay rational, and outlast the desperate fury. Lesson 6. Air power is decisive. The moment the weather cleared on December 23rd, the battle turned decisively in favor of the Allies. Allied aircraft, P-47, Thunderbolts, P-51 Mustangs, British Typhoons, B-26 Marauders, absolutely devastated German forces. Destroyed tanks and vehicles, cut supply lines, attacked troops in the open, dropped supplies to surrounded units, provided reconnaissance. German forces couldn't move in daylight without being attacked from the air. This paralyzed their offensive. Modern militaries understand this lesson. Air superiority is not just helpful, it's essential. Conflicts in the Gulf War, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere have all demonstrated that whoever controls the air usually wins the ground battle. Lesson number 7. The importance of moral authority. One factor that sustained American soldiers was the knowledge that they were fighting for a just cause against genuine evil. The Nazi regime represented everything America opposed: totalitarianism, racism, genocide, aggression. American soldiers knew they were on the right side of history. When soldiers are defending a just cause, they fight harder and sacrifice more. When they're fighting for an unjust cause or unclear reasons, morale collapses. This is why moral authority matters in conflict. It's not just about firepower or tactics. It is about whether your cause is worth fighting and dying for. The legacy. How the battle changed. History. The Battle of the Bulge had profound consequences beyond the immediate military outcome. 1. It accelerated Germany's defeat. By wasting its last reserves on the Ardennes offensive, Germany ensured it had nothing left to defend against the Soviet winter offensive. Soviet forces advanced 300 miles in 3 weeks, reaching Berlin's doorstep. Without the Battle of the Bulge, Germany might have prolonged the war by several months. Those months would have cost hundreds of thousands more lives, including potentially millions more Holocaust victims. 2. It solidified the Allied coalition. Despite the political tensions between Montgomery and American commanders, the Allies successfully coordinated a counteroffensive. The coalition held together, proving it could withstand setbacks and work together. This wartime cooperation laid the groundwork for NATO and other post-war alliances. 3. It shaped modern warfare. Military planners have studied the Battle of the Bulge extensively. Modern military doctrine emphasizes maintaining mobile reserves to respond to unexpected attacks. Intelligence services reformed their analysis methods to avoid similar failures. The importance of junior leader initiative became embedded in military training. Logistics planning became more sophisticated. 4. It created lasting bonds. The veterans of the Battle of the Bulge formed a special brotherhood. They'd shared an experience few others could understand. Veterans organizations like the Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge, VBOB, kept their stories alive and helped fellow veterans cope with trauma. Belgian people never forgot. Even today, Belgian families adopt graves at American military cemeteries, caring for them and ensuring the soldiers are remembered. 5. It shaped American identity. The Battle of the Bulge became part of American national mythology. a story of ordinary citizens facing extraordinary challenges and prevailing through courage and determination. It reinforced the American self-image as a nation that doesn't quit, that fights for freedom, that produces heroes from everyday people. The memorials, remembering the fallen. If you visit the Ardennes today, you'll find numerous memorials. Martisson Memorial, Bastogne, a star-shaped monument dedicated to American soldiers. Inside are inscribed the names of all U.S. states, acknowledging that soldiers from across America fought there. Bastogne War Museum, a state-of-the-art museum that tells the story from American, German, and Belgian civilian perspectives. It's one of the best World War II museums in Europe. Henri Chapelle American Cemetery, 7,892. American soldiers are buried here. The vast rows of white crosses and stars of David stretching across perfectly maintained grounds are deeply moving. Luxembourg American Cemetery, 5,076. Americans are buried here, including General George Patton, who requested to be buried among his men. Numerous small memorials. Throughout the Ardennes, you'll find small plaques and monuments marking where specific events occurred, where soldiers fell, where civilians were killed, where battles were fought. Belgian and Luxembourg people maintain these memorials with care. American flags fly at cemeteries. On December 16th each year, ceremonies commemorate the start of the battle. Schools teach local children about what happened. The people of the Ardennes never forgot what American soldiers did for their freedom. So let's come back to where we started. December 16th, 1944. A cold morning in Belgium. American soldiers drinking coffee, writing letters, thinking about home. Then 1,600 artillery pieces opened fire, and everything changed. Over the next 6 weeks, the largest battle in American military history unfolded across the snow-covered forests of the Ardennes. The final accounting, human cost. American, 89,500 casualties, 19,000 killed. British, 400 casualties. German, 67,000, 100,000 casualties. Belgian, Luxembourg civilians, thousands killed, tens of thousands displaced. Material cost was 700 plus as German tanks destroyed or abandoned, 600 plus American tanks destroyed, thousands of vehicles on both sides, entire towns obliterated, infrastructure throughout region destroyed. Strategic outcome: Germany's last gamble failed. Hitler bet everything on splitting the Allied coalition and forcing a negotiated peace. Instead, he wasted Germany's last strategic reserves, accelerated Germany's military collapse, ensured the Soviets would reach Berlin first, prolonged the war just enough to cause thousands more deaths. The war in Europe would end 4.5 months later on May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Nazi regime was destroyed. Europe was liberated. But the path to that victory ran through the frozen forests of the Ardennes. Intelligence services reformed their analysis methods to avoid similar failures. The importance of junior leader initiative became embedded in military training. Logistics planning became more sophisticated. 4. It created lasting bonds. The veterans of the Battle of the Bulge formed a special brotherhood. They'd shared an experience few others could understand. Veterans organizations like the Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge, VBOB, kept their stories alive and helped fellow veterans cope with trauma. Belgian people never forgot. Even today, Belgian families adopt graves at American military cemeteries, caring for them and ensuring the soldiers are remembered. 5. It shaped American identity. The Battle of the Bulge became part of American national mythology, a story of ordinary citizens facing extraordinary challenges and prevailing through courage and determination. It reinforced the American self-image as a nation that doesn't quit, that fights for freedom, that produces heroes from everyday people. The memorials, remembering the fallen. If you visit the Ardennes today, you'll find numerous memorials. Martisson Memorial, Bastogne, a star-shaped monument dedicated to American soldiers. Inside are inscribed the names of all U.S. states, acknowledging that soldiers from across America fought there. Bastogne War Museum, a state-of-the-art museum that tells the story from American, German, and Belgian civilian perspectives. It's one of the best World War II museums in Europe. Henri Chapelle American Cemetery, 7,892. American soldiers are buried here. The vast rows of white crosses and stars of David stretching across perfectly maintained grounds are deeply moving. Luxembourg American Cemetery, 5,076. Americans are buried here, including General George Patton, who requested to be buried among his men. Numerous small memorials. Throughout the Ardennes, you'll find small plaques and monuments marking where specific events occurred, where soldiers fell, where civilians were killed, where battles were fought. Belgian and Luxembourg people maintain these memorials with care. American flags fly at cemeteries. On December 16th each year, ceremonies commemorate the start of the battle. Schools teach local children about what happened. The people of the Ardennes never forgot what American soldiers did for their freedom. So let's come back to where we started. December 16th, 1944. A cold morning in Belgium. American soldiers drinking coffee, writing letters, thinking about home. Then 1,600 artillery pieces opened fire, and everything changed. Over the next 6 weeks, the largest battle in American military history unfolded across the snow-covered forests of the Ardennes. The final accounting, human cost. American, 8,900 casualties, 19,000 killed. British, no 400 casualties. German, 67,000, 100,000 casualties. Belgian, Luxembourg civilians, thousands killed, tens of thousands displaced. Material cost was 700 plus as German tanks destroyed or abandoned, 600 plus American tanks destroyed, thousands of vehicles on both sides, entire towns obliterated, infrastructure throughout region destroyed. Strategic outcome: Germany's last gamble failed. Hitler bet everything on splitting the Allied coalition and forcing a negotiated peace. Instead, he wasted Germany's last strategic reserves, accelerated Germany's military collapse, ensured the Soviets would reach Berlin first, prolonged the war just enough to cause thousands more deaths. The war in Europe would end 4.5 months later on May 8th, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Nazi regime was destroyed. Europe was liberated. But the path to that victory ran through the frozen forests of the Ardennes.